If we are using EKS to serve our static websites implemented in Angular as part of microservice-based architecture, is it a good architectural choice? And how can we make it more efficient? Using Amazon EKS or Elastic Kubernetes Service to serve static Angular websites is as part of a microservice-based architecture is not the most efficient choice, although it is possible. Here's why. Challenges with serving static websites in AKS. Number 1. Overhead of Kubernetes for static content. Kubernetes and EKS is designed to orchestrate containerized applications, handling scaling, networking, and service discovery for dynamic services. Static websites do not need these advanced features, so running them in containers within EKS introduces unnecessary complexity. Number 2, cost and efficiency. Running a Kubernetes cluster requires EC2 instances, unless using Fargate, which still has per resource cost. Number 2, serving static content from containers consumes compute and storage resources inefficiently. Number 3, scalability limitations. Kubernetes can auto-scale pods, but a CDN, content delivery network, plus object storage approach scales more efficiently for static assets. More efficient approaches. Instead of serving static Angular websites from EKS, consider these alternatives. Number 1. Use Amazon S3 plus CloudFront, best for cost and performance. Host static assets, HTML, JS, CSS in an S3 bucket. Use CloudFront to cache and serve the files globally with low latency. Enable S3 transfer acceleration to improve uploads. Configure CloudFront invalidations for cache refreshes when deploying updates. Number 2, use AWS Amplify hosting if you need CI/CD and simplicity. Supports automatic deployments from GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket. Built-in caching, SSL, and custom domains. Lower operational overhead than managing AKS. Number 3, use Nginx and Fargate if you need custom proxying. If you must containerize a static site, like running Nginx on AWS Fargate instead of AKS is more lightweight. This removes Kubernetes management overhead while still offering load balancing via ALB. When does it make sense to use AKS for static sites? If your Angular app has specific needs that justify AKS. Tight integration with microservices. If it must communicate with backend services over an internal service mesh, example Istio, custom security and routing policy. If your team needs full control over networking, access policies or API gateway integration, multi-tenancy or custom scaling logic. If your static site structure varies per tenant and Kubernetes helps organize different versions, how to optimize if using AKS anyway. If you must serve static Angular apps from AKS, optimize as follows. Use an Nginx container to serve the static files instead of a full app server. Enable CloudFront in front of AKS to cache assets globally and reduce Kubernetes loads. Use an ALB, application load balancer, for traffic routing instead of exposing pods directly. Enable pod auto-scaling based on request load to optimize cost. And consider AWS Fargate for running the static site pods, reducing EC2 cost. Conclusion. Using EKS for serving static Angular sites is overkill and inefficient unless you have specific integration needs with other microservices. The best practice is to serve static assets via S3 plus CloudFront while keeping microservices in AKS. This approach improves performance, cost, and scalability while reducing operational overhead.